I am an African.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Africa for Dummies, A4D. And today you are, of course, with myself, and we have brought back a special guest that we've had before on the South African political scene. Now that there has been an election, we decided to bring back Keenan Isaacs to talk about the aftermath of the election. There's so many things to catch up with when it comes to South African politics in the last month or so. So, welcome back to the podcast, Keenan.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, for those that weren't in our previous episodes, Keenan Isaacs is a student at Witwatersrand University in Gauteng. He's also worked at or is working at the South African History Online, as well as the South African Institute for International Affairs. I guess if we can just start with the question, what did the results say about this election? And what were the surprises of the results of the South African election?
So, following the historic 2024 national and provincial elections marking South Africa's sixth national election cycle and 30 years of democracy and the end of apartheid, South Africa has formed a government of national unity for the first time in 30 years. Obviously, the government of national unity was prompted by the poor electoral performance of the ruling party, the African National Congress, who received just slightly over 40% of the total vote share, losing its 30-year parliamentary majority. So, just to give you a brief overview of the results, according to data from the Independent Electoral Commission, which is the main body which oversees elections in the country, and Business Tech, the ANC received 40% of the vote, with the DA receiving 22%, the MK 14%, the Economic Freedom Fighters 9%, the Inkatha Freedom Party 4%, while the PA received 2% and the Freedom Front and Action SA both receiving 1% each. So one of the biggest highlights of this election is no doubt the emergence of the MK party headed by former President Jacob Zuma, which replaced the EFF led by Julius Malema as the third largest party in South Africa. Now, there's been a number of developments on that side. Although the IEC historic, debut on South Africa's election scene, they believe they should have got even more votes. However, this application has since been withdrawn, and MK MK party members have since been sworn into parliament. Another interesting highlight is the leader of the EFF, Julius Malema, humbly welcomed the results and attributed these parties' loss of support to the emergence of the MK party. So you may not be aware, but
Mm.
Julius Malema was formerly part of the ANC, and then he was the head of the youth league, and then following a spat with then ANC President Jacob Zuma, he then left the ANC Youth League and then
Yeah.
formed the Economic Freedom Fighters in 2013. But this was also prompted by the 2012 Marikana massacre. So the EFF emerged as a champion of miners and domestic workers in the country. Uh,
Yeah.
so he attributed the party's loss to the fact that many EFF supporters who who left who had left the ANC then had found a new home with MK.
Yeah.
Uh, what is also taken for granted in this election is the ANC's acknowledgement of the election results and the subsequent peaceful transition from one administration to another, as highlighted by the leader of Rise Mzansi, Songezo Zibi, at the first sitting of parliament, and
Mm.
also considering the rise of populist and right-wing governments across the globe. The political center in South Africa has held. Just yesterday, we saw uh, the attempted assassination on former President Donald Trump,
Yeah.
which highlights the growing violence in democracies across the globe.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a very important thing to note, especially on this continent. I mean, not only on this continent, as you mentioned, the assassination attempt of Donald Trump, and then the previous incident several years ago when Donald Trump refused to accept defeat, and
Yeah.
they took over the Congress. Um, and it's no, it's quite funny that our examples are now coming from the US on how bad, how you should not run democratic transitions. And so back to South Africa, the MK factor. Do you think the MK was underestimated, but at the same time, it's the third largest party and it's overtaken the EFF, the Marxist party led by Julius Malema, who was very famous across, various African or Pan-African echo chambers. And people are kind of shocked at how he has, you know, um, I wouldn't say they have done terribly, but they have not grown in the way I think they expected with their 9%. Um, so what is appealing about the MK in comparison to the EFF? Because for many people, with that sort of Pan-Africanist African agenda, often you could see that in their pages, they're quite disappointed that the EFF didn't, you know. Some people even thought the EFF would win, would get the largest vote, would unseat the DA, and it didn't happen. And I think people were going quite far, also being quite xenophobic in a sense, saying, "Oh, it's only foreigners who are voting for the EFF," because they seem to have a very big African agenda rather than a South African agenda. What do you have to say about that?
So obviously, Jacob Zuma, who was the president of South Africa for 9 years, has a long history of politics. He was a former struggle veteran as well, and he was part of the MK, the Mkhonto weSizwe, which was the armed wing of the ANC the lib- during the liberation struggle and the fight for democracy. So he comes with uh, a lot of support prior to him founding the MK party. Um, Interestingly, while the results were still being tallied, Gwedi Mantashe, one of the ANC's long-standing members, and was was at the IEC National Center in Midrand, where they tally the votes from across the country, and he made a statement saying that clearly there has been, with regard to the rise of the MK party, there has been a nationalization of or a national mobilization of Zulu people in the country. So so he he attributed the rise of uh, Mkhonto to being a ethnic nationalist party.
And
On
Zuma
the other
exported
hand,
fully.
on the other hand, also considering both the EFF and MK uh, emerge out of the ANC, a lot of the voting base is still very much rural. So they haven't really been able to break into many of the metropoles and the cities in the country.
So are Zuma supporters similar to EFF supporters?
If we look at the provinces in which the MK received the most support, it is in KwaZulu-Natal and Limpopo province. And the areas in those provinces are predominantly Zulu speaking. So that's why there's the notion that uh, Zulu people in the country were mobilized or influenced to vote for
Yeah,
Nkonto.
yeah. And so now the so if I understand it properly, the South African election has to select a president after the parliament, when the first sitting of parliament. And for those that were watching, it was quite an interesting thing to watch, especially it being the first time that the ANC has got less than a majority, has got 40% when it's used to getting over 60. Um, I mean, it got 57 in the last one, but it was quite more for most of the time in the last 30 years, it had got over 60%. Now, there was also confusion, like some people were saying we don't even know who the president will be. Um, could you just give us an understanding of that? Uh, why, first of all, you still have the same president, even though the ANC has got less than uh 60, less than 50% of the vote. And perhaps that could be a good segue to just go into talking about the government of national unity and what that's all about and how that came about.
As you rightly mentioned, Parliament does elect the president of the republic. However, South Africa has a proportional representation system, as mentioned in the previous episode. So there are 400 seats in South Africa's National Assembly, which is the lower house of the South African Parliament. And in in an election, these seats are proportionally divided amongst the parties according to the vote they have received in the election. So although the ANC did not receive outright majority or a two-thirds majority, which is 50% plus one, they still the party which received the majority of the votes, which is over slightly over 40%. So it was the onus was on them to form a coalition, or as we have it in this case, a government of national unity, which then allayed fears that South Africa would have to enter a minority coalition. So Cyril Ramaphosa was elected or re-elected as president of the Republic of South Africa with the support of of parties that have signed onto the government of national unity. So he has been re-elected with the support of GNU parties.
So who are the GNU parties specifically, and how did that um like they're so different ideologies, and how was the jostling for who is in the GNU, and like what's the perception of the GNU amongst like ordinary South Africans?
So to date, more than 10 parties have signed the GNU Statement of Intent, which is basically stating that they will work together and uh, achieve consensus. And in cases where consensus will cannot be achieved, relative consensus will then be applied.
Mm. So who exactly are the political parties in the GNU, or at least the key players?
Yes, the Democratic Alliance, the Patriotic Alliance, the Inkatha Freedom Party, the Good Party, the Freedom Front Plus, the United Democratic Movement, and Al Jama'ah, as well as New Kid on the Block, Rise Mzansi. Um, Together, these parties equate to more than 70% of the seats in the National Assembly.
Mm.
Now, there have been many critics of the GNU, because the definition of some definition of the GNU is um, a government formed by major or all political parties. So the criticism is that uh, two of the largest parties in the country have been left out of the obviously MK and the EFF. However, they've been invited to join the government of national unity. However, they chose they declined.
Why did they decline?
So at least from the EFF, uh, what it what their leader Julius Malema has said is that this is not a government of national unity, rather a grand coalition between the ANC and the DA, and basically that it is a pro-business, pro-white-led government.
So um the government of national unity, I think it took a few weeks for Ramaphosa to create an establishment. And actually, there was also a lot of talk about how long Ramaphosa took, although if you look at examples from across the world, some of these, European countries um, take, almost a year to come up with coalitions. Um, coalition governments like, the Netherlands and all of those, Italy also take quite long to come up with coalitions. So many people expected the Democratic Alliance, the sort of center right pro-business party, to uh, place vice president. So if you can just run us down what unfolded in terms of the cabinet, because it looks like there's quite a lot of cabinet positions, and I have a list here. I think the leader has instead got has become Minister of Agriculture. What exactly, the ANC seems to have almost outsmarted the DA in terms of what people were expecting, a deputy president from the opposition and so on, but that hasn't happened. And some key ministries also haven't gone to the opposition. But yeah, so if you can run us down, what exactly has the DA got in this cabinet, being the second largest member of the GNU and also the second largest political party in terms of vote share?
So as you rightly mentioned, there was a lot of tussle over the formation of the government of national unity. And as you rightly mentioned, in some countries it's taken months to form coalition governments, and in some cases even years. However, Cyril Ramaphosa did it in 2 weeks, and this is a feat that um, can be commended. However, the negotiations over cabinet positions also threatened to derail the newly formed government of national unity, as it was marked by letters being leaked online regarding the negotiations. In particular, the DA, which was the former opposition, requested at least 12 ministerial posts, and the leader of the Patriotic Alliance, Caton McKenzie, asking for the Department of Home Affairs. Despite the tensions of the negotiations, Ramaphosa announced his cabinet, uh, or which is the executive, on Sunday, the 30th of June, marking the start of South Africa's seventh administration. So, despite the DA's request for 12 ministerial posts, the DA received six ministerial posts and several deputy posts, with its leader John Steenhuisen being appointed as Minister of Agriculture. The Patriotic Alliance leader was appointed Minister of Sports and Arts and Culture. The IFP, Freedom Front, and Good Party each received cabinet posts as well. So a few of the other ministerial posts the DA received is Minister of Basic Education and Minister of Infrastructure and Development. I believe this is an achievement for the DA. This is something that they have welcomed, as well as this is the first time that they are actually in represented in government. So
Yeah.
they can so although they've governed provinces like the Western Cape for many years, they can now be able to transfer the experience of governing these provinces and metropoles into and bring that into the national government.
Yeah. So, there's some things I've noticed. I mean, I think a lot of people from the sort of left side, the EFF, look at it sort of like, oh, the ANC is in bed with the DA. But as you said, obviously they claimed they wanted 12. And I think there was also another letter, I don't know if it was leaked or it was published, where Cyril Ramaphosa quite diplomatically rubbished the request by Helen Ziller, the DA former leader, and I think she's in the party structures, federal chairperson, I think. Um, the I feel like key ministries, of course, there's several key ministries that the DA have had that you've mentioned, but sort of the ministry of Minister of Finance is still Eno Gondo Gondogwana is still ANC. Minister of Health is still ANC. Minister of Defense still ANC. The Minister of International Relations is still ANC. Um, but there was also another interesting one where the Minister of Home Affairs is DA, and I think the Minister of Land Reform is from a smaller member from the Pan-African Congress. Many people noted that there's a lot of skillful positioning in this cabinet. All the sort of most of the most critical ministries sensitive to defense, foreign affairs, health, finance, or ANC. He split the agricultural ministry to DA and the land reform one to the Pan-African Congress, which itself was in the ANC way back, several, almost half a century ago. What do you think about that? It's quite skillful, I think, in my opinion.
I think it's a delicate I think it's a good balance between the parties in the GNU. Um, there's the Good Party, which is led by former mayor of Cape Town, Patricia de Lille, who was who left the DA in 2019 to found her own party. Patricia de Lille was the former mayor of Cape Town and a member of the Democratic Alliance, left in 2019 and formed the Good Party. So when Cyril Ramaphosa was elected in 2019, he appointed her as his Minister of Public Works. She has now been given the new post as Minister of Tourism.
So she was
So
a DA minister under an ANC government at one point.
no, she was a good minister.
Oh, so this is the second time she's being a minister under the good banner.
Yes,
Oh, I
but she
see.
was the only um member of parliament outside of the ANC to be appointed to the executive.
Hmm. What's so special about her though? Why was she so um why does she seem to feature for the second time in parliament?
So I think it's partly influenced by the support she has on the Cape Flats amongst the colored community.
Hmm. But this time around there's also sort of the Gayton Mackenzie also rivaling that voter base, isn't it?
Yes.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, I think this is a very,
Also
yeah, sure.
in terms of to further elaborate on the share of cabinet posts, the Freedom Front Plus, which is considered one of the parties advocating the for rights of white minority and Afrikaners, has been given the Ministry of the Correctional Services. Um, and although you rightly mentioned that the Minister of Finance is still Ino Godongwana, however, the Deputy Minister of Finance is um Arusharpin from the DA. The likewise with the Ministry of International Relations. Although Ronald Lamola has been appointed as Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, who is a member of the ANC, there are two other deputy posts, uh, one of which is shared by a non-ANC member. And then we have the Department of Defense also, which is still headed by the ANC appointed Angie Motshekga. However, one of the deputy ministers is Bantu Olomisa from the UDM. However, the ANC has received criticism um because Bantu Olomisa would have been a better fit for defense minister instead of being a deputy.
Yeah. Um, yeah, no, this is very interesting. Okay, so you're saying there was a bit of some disappointments in the cabinet placements, like for Bantu Holomisa, who is the UDM, United Democratic Movement leader. He didn't get any ministerial position, in the same way that other, even smaller party leaders, got ministerial positions.
Yeah, so he was appointed as deputy minister of defense.
But that's quite a big role, though, even as a deputy minister.
Yeah, there there's some critics have said that South Africa's cabinet is also bloated.
Yeah.
So in this particular cabinet, instead of normally having one deputy minister to accommodate other GNU parties, we now have in some um, ministries two deputy ministers.
Yeah, which is
So we'd
also,
have the
yeah,
minister and then two additional deputy ministers.
which is also quite
Which has,
interesting because in Zambia, a few in the 2016 constitution, which was quite a big overhaul of the constitution, they basically canceled the portfolio of deputy ministers due to wastage and so on. Because I was looking at the South African one and I was saying some of these ministries, what exactly is the second deputy minister? I can understand Ministry of Foreign Affairs, defense, perhaps. They have, some are political, some are administrative, some are but there's some ministries where you kind of wonder, is this portfolio simply political? And this is a lot of money also, going to something which there's not a specific understanding of what this deputy minister will be doing.
Yeah. So some of the ministries in this cabinet were combined and some were split. So the Department of Higher Education and Training was combined with the Department of um Science, Technology and Innovation. However, that has now been separated again.
Oh, just within the past few weeks, it's been separated again.
Yeah.
So now you have a particular ministry for, higher education, the universities and so on.
Yes. No. We had one, but it was combined. So in 2019,
Yeah.
when Cyril was elected, he combined the two, Department of Higher Education and Science and Technology, which was headed by Dr. Blade Nzimande.
Oh, so now it's split after the GNU.
Now it's split. Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. So, and another thing also is the composition in terms of the representation of South Africa. Maybe before we go into this, what is the mood in terms of the ordinary people? Do people genuinely feel, does this feel like the beginning of a new start? Does it feel, people are likening this to 1994. Does it feel like South Africa is going to be so much better now? Is there an expectation? Is there a high expectation from this GNU? Or do people just say, oh, same old, don't really care?
Um. So I think there's been a positive reception from South Africans on the street regarding the formation of a GNU representing multiple parties with many expressing support. There has generally been a positive reception from South Africans on the street regarding the formation of a government of national unity representing multiple parties across the political spectrum from the left and the right. And there's a general expression of support for President Ramaphosa and the newly formed government of national unity. Many South Africans, as you rightly mentioned, were reminiscing on the government of national unity that was formed in 1994. However, the the government of national unity that was formed in 1994 was mandated by the interim constitution at that time, which saw the ANC and National Party sharing power. This came to an end in 1997. However, the African National Congress didn't have to uh, enter government of national unity with the National Party as it had the outright majority, which was more than well over 60% of the vote. However, uh, considering the transition from decades of white minority rule to a majoritarian democracy, this was also um, necessary for the peace and stability of the country at that time. So, therefore, government of national unity differs from ordinary coalitions. A GNU can be described as a government formed in a time of national crisis or disaster. However, South Africa's GNU 2.0, as it is described by many, was necessitated by the fact that no party had received an outright majority, meaning that South Africa is now a truly multi-party democracy as envisioned by the constitution. So not only do we have uh, a greater share of parties represented in parliament, we also now see that represented in the national executive, which is the cabinet.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Um, this is definitely a different time. Um, and the it's also interesting the way, and I think when people talk about the GNU, they tend to have exact similarities, although as you said, the ANC didn't necessarily have to have the national party in the Government of National Unity in 1994, whereas in this situation, they somewhat have to for them to simply
Yeah.
breathe. Um, what I also saw is there's a remarkable amount of honesty, and I think this goes back to the same thing of peaceful transitions. I mean, if you could call it a transition, it's still the same president, deputy minister, but it's definitely a different dispensation. Um, but there's a degree of honesty, from Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General of the African National Congress, very candid about how that they have lost, but also very strong about how Ramaphosa is non-negotiable, President Ramaphosa is non-negotiable, and so on. Uh, Many people are saying, I think many people predicted sort of an Armageddon of some sorts, but that didn't happen. But what many people are also predicting is the end of the ANC. In the next 5 years, should we see, some people have all sorts of conspiracies. The DA will come in and then and that was the conspiracy linked to the fact that the DA might have a deputy president. That the DA will come in and they'll do an impeachment move and take down Ramaphosa and put in a DA president. Some are saying that the ANC has survived, has given itself another lease of life and will be here for much longer. Um, yeah. So what's your opinion on the future of the
Mm.
ANC now? Are these the dying, maybe not dying is a strong word, but is this the ANC just sort of accepting a future where they will have less of a stake, or is the ANC here to stay? You know,
Mm.
because when the I saw the ANC didn't get over 50. I joked about them joining South Africa, beginning to join the Post-Liberation Party Club of Southern Africa, because Zimbabwe still has their liberation party in power. Botswana, Namibia, Mozambique, Angola, Tanzania, they all have their parties. I think the only countries that don't have their political parties in power is Zambia, Malawi, maybe Mauritius. Um, that should be it. I think Lesotho is a bit complicated. Swaziland is obviously an absolute monarchy. Um, so yeah, what's the future for the ANC? Are they as strong as they seem to portray, or is this simply a compromise on how they will fade out eventually?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. But as you mentioned, some have said, this is a new lease of life for the ANC. But if you consider that the ANC is the oldest liberation movement, not just in South Africa, but the entire African continent. And they came into government in South Africa's first democratic election in 1994. And when Cyril Ramaphosa was elected as president of the ANC at the Nazareth conference in 2017, um, he promised to start the process of renewal of the ANC following decades of corruption and financial malfeasance during the Zuma administration. So Cyril Ramaphosa came in with the aim to restructure and renew the ANC. One of the policies he proposed was the step aside policy. So if ANC officials
The
serving
the
in
step aside
ministerial,
policy.
yes, the step aside policy. So if they have been implicated in corruption allegations or have committed criminal offenses, they would then have to step aside from these positions. But obviously, during Cyril's previous term, he was criticized because, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, because there were many fraudulent tenders that were awarded. Some would even say that corruption increased under his watch. But then again, the state institutions, such as the National Prosecuting Authority, was also strengthened.
And then there's the all of these the blah blah. I always miss the pronunciation for this. But there's the farm scandal, the blah blah scandal. Oh yeah, and will the DA sort of arrest this issue? And if any of these things happen, because they're in a government with the ANC and they seem intent on arresting the corruption that ensued. So if this happens, will will it cause a friction in this sort of government of national unity if they say, okay, we'll bring up the blood bath scandal where there's $4 million found in his farm. We'll bring up this scandal, we'll bring up that. Yeah.
Uh, I'm not sure if you watched the first sitting of Parliament where Cyril Ramaphosa was being elected, and the Deputy President of the EFF, um, Floyd Chivambu, he then asked the newly elected Speaker of Parliament, Toko Didiza, on the status of um, Parliament's investigation into the Palafala farm scandal. However, this obviously we have to see now what happens because Parliament's oversight committees have only recently been formed. So uh, there's the perception that this the Falafala saga is done as the DA is now in the government of national unity.
Mm.
And as I mentioned before, Cyril Ramaphosa was re-elected with the support of GNU parties, which includes the Democratic Alliance. So
Now,
it's a kind of many
yeah,
have criticized the DA for this position, saying
a bit of
it's hypocritical. Yeah.
yeah, a bit of hypocrisy. Yeah, no, I'm so
But
yeah,
that is politics. Politics is about horse trading, and
true. Yeah.
the DA was a formidable opposition, and
Yeah.
uh, it's it will be interesting to see how they'll perform as government.
Mm. But the DA is already facing quite a lot of criticism. There was a situation with a member of parliament. I think his name is Gauss, his surname. Um,
Ronaldo.
yes, Ronaldo Gauss. Uh, what was that about? Um, if you could just,
So
yeah.
Ronaldo House was elected as a member of parliament for the Democratic Alliance, and um recently videos emerged on social media depicting him uh where he makes a number of racial slurs towards black Africans in the country. And I believe there was, I think, in a separate incident, I'm not sure if it's the same member or another member of the DA who was pictured in blackface.
Mm, mm.
So yes, that there has been those criticisms. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a,
as you know,
yeah.
raise even 30 years after the end of apartheid still continues to be one of the most pertinent issues in South African politics.
Yeah, it's quite a turbulent thing. And I think it goes back to that whole debate again where people were talking about kill the Boer. And he said kill he said the K word, which is, I said the K word, which is kafir, I think, or kafa, which is a very insulting derogatory term in the same way that it is with the N word in the United States. Um,
Yes. It's
s-
actually been, the
yeah.
term has been criminalized
Mm.
in South Africa. So someone has already been arrested for using the word.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's in itself, that's a whole different discussion. That's a whole different episode of what to do. You can say the N-word in America, but in South Africa, that word can't be said. I think, to be honest, I agree more with the South African angle. I've never really had the sort of feeling of owning what really was an insult. But anyway, the has anything happened to Mr. Gauss as he's, a member of parliament? He's receiving public taxpayers' money. Um, and they seem to have just been a Twitter debate over what he said between, oh, is it right to say kill the Boer? But oh, is it right to say kill the, K word? So I don't know. So what's going to happen to him? Has the DA reprimanded him in any way? That's still unbecoming, I think, of parliamentary behavior as a member of parliament. Has the DA
So
reprimanded him?
that,
Or
yeah, that is unbecoming. Obviously the DA will try and protect one of its members. The statement that it made to the media didn't even mention that racist. So it just mentioned that he'll be dealt with internally, which is he won't be dealt with at all.
military tribunal amongst
Yeah.
military people? Yeah. Um, yeah, no, that's interesting. There's lots that happened in this very short time. Um, so what has the GNU done so far? Are people able to see what has been done so far, or is it too early?
Uh, yeah, it is a bit too early to anticipate what the GNU will do. But as you mentioned, one of the newly appointed DA ministers, I think it's Dean McPherson, who's just uncovered web of corruption equating to, I don't know, 300 million rands. Um, that is one development. And another development is the actions taken by the Minister of Sports and Arts and Culture, Kaiton McKenzie, who has cut funding to what is called super fans. So at major South African sporting events, um, the state sponsors what it called super fans to, be there and kind of um, represent and support South Africa on.
So like the Vuvuzela guys with the
Yes,
colorful
those guys,
face
those
painting.
guys.
Yeah.
So
And the rugby guys. Yeah.
Gaitan has cut funding to those people and has promised to reallocate these funds to support South Africa's athletes, and he's also expressed support for South Africa's rugby Darasi and South Africa's Springbok captain Siya Kolisi. So we 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 watching his Eastern year with interest.
Mm. And he's quite an animated guy, Gayton Mackenzie. His
Yeah, it is.
tweets are very hard to avoid, even if you want to avoid him.
Yeah, but overall, I think the new developments have imbued a renewed sense of hope and optimism
Mm.
in the country, and that is, something South Africans are famously known for,
Yeah.
despite the challenges that we face.
Definitely more accountability. I think, I mean, from judging by the moods, it seems like there's definitely an expectation of um
Yes.
more accountability. Although what I've always been interested in, and I think we'll probably know this later on, the corridor discussions. There's always that notion of, how civil servants behave when a new minister comes in. Um, I think there've been quite a lot of movies and also behind the scenes of when Mandela became president, how, all of a sudden people that, were machinizing brutally against the ANC and, generally non-white South Africans were somehow just, employees of Mandela. Um, so in this situation, I wonder how civil servants who are used to working under ANC government are just now all of a sudden working under DA minister. Of course, there's no expectation that they're political, but I think they are human beings at the same time. So I wonder how,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the day, when there's an election, there's ANC, there's DA, there's EFF. But
Mm,
once they in parliament and are elected to ministerial positions and serve in portfolio committees,
yeah,
then they are still members of the respective political parties, but they are colleagues as well.
yeah, true.
So
Yeah,
they work together.
yeah, yeah. We'll
So
see. Yeah, we'll see how they work it out. Um. Anyway, I did a little count, and I saw there are like 32 ministers, 38, I think, deputy ministers, if not more. Of which six are white. The ministers, six are white, representing 18%. 13 are women, representing 40%. That's quite a lot of women, and it looks quite fairly represented. And I think there's about, let me see. I mean, I think there's about, I don't know if there's an Indian member, minister. I'm not sure. Um, but it looks much more representative than the previous cabinet.
yes, yes, it's considered one of South Africa's most diverse cabinets.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah. So if I could conclude,
sure, sure. Yeah, that's
yeah,
what I'm saying.
although the 29 May election was considered historic by many, the voter turnout was 58% on the day,
Mm,
which means that of the 27 million registered voters, 11 million didn't cast their ballots. As mentioned in a previous episode on the show as well, the
yeah,
factors include increased voter apathy and a general displeasure with democracy amid rising poverty and unemployment. The voter turnout, especially among the youth, has prompted the need for greater civic engagement and youth civic education programs so
yeah,
that we involve more people in the democratic process.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's actually very true. I think I saw there's a political analyst who was talking about the percentages, and the percentage just simply cascades as you go towards, the black race. White voter turnout was around 70. The Indian voter turnout was around 60 something, 68. Colored voter turnout was, I think, 59, 58. Black voter turnout was at 54, less than 55%. So
Uh,
yeah, there's definitely some sort of voter apathy going on, and it's definitely something interesting to see. These are very, new times, even though I think they're parallels drawn to history. They're very new times, and as always, I think people need more solid, credible civic engagement and education. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, which is why we're here anyway, talking about these politics here. Just
I
generally,
think it also comes back to
yeah.
a level of um you know uh, civic responsibility. But as you mentioned now that with um in terms of race demographics, there was a 70% voter turnout amongst white South Africans,
Yeah.
where black and colored voter turnout was much less. But
Hmm.
if you consider, if you look at it, and uh, you would realize that much of South Africa's economic landscape is still controlled by people.
Yeah.
So so they have a vested interest in what happens in the country, in terms of the formation of policies and
Hmm.
so on. I think what black people and colored people need to realize in the country is that they need to participate, um so that, because in at the end of the day, politicians make decisions that will affect our daily lives,
Yeah.
and participating in democracy would give you some sort of voice, in what in where you get to love, and which
Yeah.
schools you
I mean,
attend, and so
yeah, I totally agree with that because I always complain about how when someone says, "Oh no, I'm not interested in politics," like politics controls everything from even the quality of air you breathe. Like
yeah,
what you're breathing is a political, even I told someone that even time zone is a political, it can be a political decision. Which time zone you are in can change depending on what parliament wants at a particular time. There's been countries that have changed time zones. Uh,
yeah. So it doesn't matter if you don't do politics. Politics will do you in any case.
yeah, that's a good note to end it on. And yeah, I mean, as you've said, young people need to engage more in politics. It could be running for office. We don't know. Maybe we'll find His Excellency President Keenan Isaacs one day. But sorry?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm saying it's not impossible.
Absolutely, absolutely.
In this country, you can go from prison to parliament.
Yeah, we've seen enough examples. Not only Mandela, but
Yes,
the more jovial Gayton Mackenzie.
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I think that's a good note to end it on. I just want to thank you once again for sparing your time to come on A4D podcast. We've dropped so many knowledge bombs and updated everyone on what's going on in South Africa.
Thank you for having me once again.
Sure. Thank you for listening to us. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, share wherever you're listening to us from. Thank you for tuning into Africa for Dummies.
I am an African.